Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of What's the Finish, where we look and regale in the flavors of life. I'm delighted to share this space and time with you and with a very dear friend, Naina Bhedwar from Sir Kitchens. Naina, it's a pleasure to have you.
Lovely to be here, David. Thank you.
Well, my pleasure, my pleasure. So this is just a brief conversation, really about what makes us tick. Where does it all come from, the passion to be able to serve and delight and bring people experiences that move them from the familiar, what they think they're getting, to an unfamiliar place, right? So maybe tell us a little bit first about your background and the kind of style of cuisine that you bring to
the table.
Yeah, to your clients. Yeah.
Well, I arrived in the US now December 19th makes 12 years. And that was when I was finally able to set up my business officially. I've been cooking for as long as I can remember. I lived in London for most of my adult life and was a special needs teacher.
Wow.
For 16 years, and was cooking at night and cooking on the side and trying to figure out a way to get this off the ground. I'm not culinary school trained, but I am hugely passionate, and I feel like these days you learn more from YouTube than you. I honestly don't know how people in the previous generation did it with just books and libraries and things like that.
And maybe formal training, I guess. But,
yes.
But regardless, when you were in London and when you were young, what was the influence? Who was the influence on you that put you on this path of like being comfortable in the kitchen?
I think
flavors.
Interestingly enough, in India, I was born in India. And I was there till I was 8. And my grandparents, it's quite common in India to have domestic help in the house. So they had a cook who was a young guy, and he was just really passionate, and he taught himself as well. He'd arrived at their home at 14. By the time I was a kid, he was in his 30s, something like that. And he would just draw up a little stool, and I would spend months at their house in the summers and things like that. And
at their house?
At their home in Calcutta in India. Yeah.
Wow.
And he would tell me, now put this in here and put that in there. And if I ever, I'm not attracted to the restaurant world, but if I ever was, I would probably name the restaurant after him, Hanif, because he was just such an influence.
And what was his name again?
Hanif, Hanif. Yeah.
Hanif, wow.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much where the seed was sown.
Sure.
And then I just kind of took off from there.
Wow. And so 12 years, December 19th.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And you started your family here?
Yes. So that was one of the main reasons we moved here, because in London my husband wasn't able to find a job. I was on a teacher's salary. We wanted to start a family. I wanted to start cooking. I wasn't able to get the business off the ground there officially.
Right.
And Atlanta was just so welcoming and so amazing, and I just sailed into it without, barely a bump. Managed to raise my kids alongside and, keep that flexibility.
Just a quick side question, like what do you think about, Atlanta being so welcoming and also being a city where now Atlanta has grown as well as you have? Hugely. Yeah. And it's now known, on the culinary stage for its share of Michelin star restaurants. Does that up your game? Does that, do you feel like, what's your reaction to that development in Atlanta?
I think my entry was very well timed, because I know that if I had moved to New York or LA or one of those places, I think my business would have had a harder time. I would have probably faced the same challenges that I did in London, where the food scene is just so elevated and also so saturated with the kind of food that I offer that you have to have something really unusual to be able to catch people's eye. Coming to Atlanta in 2012 reminded me of when I got to London in 97. I hadn't really started the cooking at that point, but I was fully immersed in the food scene because I'm such a foodie. And then watching that grow, and Atlanta's trajectory over the last 12 years has been very similar.
I see.
It's like in the beginning there wasn't much going on, and that actually gave me a great foothold, because what I brought to the table was so unusual and esoteric, and there weren't that many restaurants. I like to say that there's one particular spice, dried fenugreek leaf, which is very essential for the kind of cooking that I do, that I couldn't get here easily when I first moved here, and my mum had to send it to me.
So describe what that dried fenugreek
Greek leaf, yeah.
fenugreek leaf. What is, describe that aroma or that flavor?
It would actually be interesting with wine because it's I like to call it an Indian restaurant in a box. There's typical Indian restaurants that you walk into here, you're just hit with that smell as soon as you walk in.
Right.
And it is because North Indian food tends to be, I think, slightly overrepresented in the Indian sphere, and all the other regions, which all have so much to offer, are relatively underrepresented.
Right.
And I that is a phenomenon that I keep intending to look into and haven't yet. Butter chicken and, you know, tikka masala and all of these sorts of things, probably because of the British influence, because it was mostly North Indian over there as well. But this spice features so heavily in all North Indian cuisine, and it has notes of maple, hay, tobacco, tea. And it's just, and I mean, the way you're supposed to add it to food is you put it in your non-dominant hand and you make a mortar and pestle out of your hand, basically.
Without even...
you just do this.
Okay.
And it's very, very crudely processed, so it breaks down very easily. And it just, you do it over the bubbling pot of curry or stew or whatever you're making, and then kind of let it fall in.
Sure.
It's one of my favorite video things, is taking this and, you know, watching it fall in and then smelling your hands.
Really? Oh my goodness.
It's a beautiful, beautiful spice, and now it's available down the road, no problem.
So that's a little technique. Like, I will take fresh herbs. We're in front of this beautiful kind of herb garden.
Oh, gorgeous. And
but basil in particular, but anything. I mean, you have it in your hand and you smack it, you start to release the oils. And then you can chop it up, but you've already kind of like broken down some cell walls just from that force. And then it's on your hands, which is great. So, okay, thank you. That's I've never heard that described that way, that spice. And obviously, so describe your cuisine, because I've heard you say Indian, but I know from some of the past wonderful experiences in which I've been fortunate enough to be, you know, a recipient of your cooking. It spans different regions, and you push the envelope of not staying in a comfort zone, but going in other places. So try to describe it, obviously, maybe what home is, but then where you like to go and venture out.
I honestly have no idea where home is.
Okay, it's gotten to that point where... So it's not necessarily, you can't be boxed into, like, you're a catering business, right? So you're not boxed into just Indian food.
Catering and cooking classes.
Catering and cooking classes.
So I taught for so many years, but I taught special needs kids. So teaching has been in my blood, and teaching was just a natural option for me. But the school scene never felt quite right, but I knew I wanted to teach. Now I teach in cooking schools to, you know, wonderful adults who are coming and paying good money to listen to what I have to say, and I don't have to tell them to sit still and sit down. That's right. And they're asking intelligent questions and wanting to know more about, you know, and I learn so much from them as well. But the span of my cuisine comes from the fact that the Indian community that I originate from is Zoroastrian. I'm not sure not very many people know. Yes. So Zoroastrians originate from Iran. Yes. So we came from Persia, how long ago now? 1,500 years ago to India. Yes. But a lot of, and I have never been back to Iran. It is a huge bucket list item for me. It would be hopefully when things settle down. Yeah. My parents have managed to go back. I know we have a small tight-knit community here in Atlanta. And I think the food aspect, certainly in India, I knew all about the version of Iranian food that we have created as a community over there, which is a wonderful confluence and melding of Iranian flavors and Indian spices and techniques. And it's created this entirely separate cuisine that is just, it's known all over India, for sure. Sure, but not here. Here a little bit less so. And everybody keeps asking me, why aren't you putting that on the map? And I was like, I've tried, and I'm, you know, it's going slowly, but. So here we'll talk a little bit more about, you know, this is where our paths, you know, cross. Yeah. And this sense of, I mentioned it in the beginning, I mean, our goals are to see, and part of the joy that I get is that there is no experience without discovery. Mm-hmm.
if you are having some kind of experience, there's no discovery to it, you're in a routine of sorts. And then it's somewhat involuntary because it is a routine, and your brain is free to kind of just associate because you're on autopilot, whether that's in the car and driving to a destination, or whether it's, any going and doing, some shopping or grocery shopping. But when we're in an experience, there is by definition something to discover. And in that, you're moving from the familiar to the unfamiliar. So starting off with something that says, hey, look, we're not going to go right into the Zoroastrian cuisine here. We're going to start with something, and by the end of this, you're going to be introduced to some things along the way that move you just slightly. It's the same thing with champagne. I come across with here is champagne. You may have some preconceptions about it, but let's bust some of these myths. Like, champagne is not a cocktail. It shouldn't be just a cocktail. In fact, it is a perfect delivery and pairing device with food, and the more exotic or the more flavorful and the more distinct and unusual the flavor, the more you can ride that champagne's effervescence. And most people get headaches, at certain ages that there start to come. For me as well, I started getting headaches. And so the whole reason to start the champagne company was to, let's go find champagne made in a better way that isn't mass produced, that's organic. So now I'm able to truly enjoy something like champagne coursed with cuisine like yours, and not feel anything the next day other than a fantastic memory of this food and wine pairing. So I definitely believe that when I've been around your cuisine, you have, it's always something anchored in the familiar, and then it winds up going someplace in the second or third or fourth course into where, well, this is, this is new and it's amazing. Thank you. Do you feel that you're delivering that certainly in your courses and your classes that you teach, as well as the cuisine?
Yes, I've had to. It's been a learning curve, and it's still a learning curve for me as well, because I was using in my classes right in the beginning, in the first couple of years that I was here. I look back on recipes that I developed and wrote back then, and I look at them now, and it's like a totally different person.
Really? Sure.
I was way too complex. I was assuming that people knew more than they did. So I've had to really adopt beginner's mind, which has been so good for me as well, because I've gone back to the drawing board and learned so much more. I've connected with people who sell organic spices in India, and every time I go back, I'm actually going back on Wednesday.
To where?
To India.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Sure.
I'm hoping to visit a farm that grows turmeric, and they do a little bit of saffron, and talking to the farmers and just getting more of a feel of how these things are produced and where they come from and how they lend themselves. It's so easy to just look at a bag or a bottle on a shelf and have that go into your food, but I feel like we carry that history with us. We carry those experiences with us.
It would be great to lead like a group of local farmers as well, to say, come if you could, and but I would hope you bring back that knowledge and then visit with some farmers and say, there's a market for this. Think about devoting some of it to growing ginger or growing saffron. Oh my gosh, Georgia saffron? That could work.
Why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
Oh my, everything else grows like kudzu around here, so that's amazing. So again, talk a little bit about your passion then for doing this. This all comes. First of all, it's fascinating that your journey, when you look back at these early recipes, aren't like, that was so basic, and now it's actually just
gone the other way.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. That is amazing.
I think I was trying to be a little too fancy, and all of a sudden it was such a high to be in front of an audience that was so willing to listen to me and was coming to find. Teaching special needs kids is tough, and all of a sudden it was quite easy.
Right.
And I think that kind of sent me a little, off into the clouds a bit, and thinking, I can, go a little heavy on top with things. But now I do a lot more. And at that time, I was doing much more of the Indian and the Zoroastrian and the Indo-Persian stuff. And then I've slowly started to branch out and do more traditional Persian, just traditional Persian. And then, of course, everything in between. So Moroccan and Syrian and Jordanian and Israeli and, everything. Like the dinner that you were at a couple of weeks ago had the Persian saffron rice. It had
Right.
the Moroccan chicken.
Right.
It had Arabic bread. It had,
That's
it had
right.
like the whole gamut. The cake was actually more of an Italian thing, but the cream had rosewater in it. So I tried to draw in those flavors and those nuances from here and there, and present them with things like a chocolate cake, which is quite familiar,
Right.
rather than say baklava or something like that.
Correct.
So a fusion of sorts, even though that word fusion is quite loaded.
It can be, but fusion in the sense that it's undefinable. But you still keep a distinction through the courses and through your food that I think is people value, because you can't throw them in the deep end without just from the beginning. You've got to slowly move them there.
Yeah.
And so fusion can be that kind of bridge.
Yeah.
Which is great. So, I present the champagnes, and they come with all those sorts of these flavor profiles. Some that are like really high acid, and like the Blanc de Blanc is kind of like electric lemons. And then there are ones that have more of a softer note, that are more apple, baked apple, and rhubarb and such.
That's the kind that complements.
Right, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
So I often will say in pairings that it's the softer one that's Pinot Meunier led. That's the Carte Pearl from André Tessier, and others like it, the Brut Classique from Raflin de Pitre. These have the notes that will certainly pair well with Persian and Indian food. And if you have this kind of takeout, I say takeout, if you have an experience with your cuisine, but if that's I say takeout because it doesn't have to be a Friday and Saturday occasion. If it's takeout on a Tuesday, and you break open the champagne with the understanding that I'm not having a headache that I'm going to be paying for on Wednesday, then you've just taken something that's Indian takeout and elevated it to the highest, frankly, it could possibly go with this when you're sharing it with somebody. And suddenly you've really just carved out from the week a small spot that says, hey, Tuesday, or even hey, Thursday, this is...
let's make it special.
Let's make it special. So that's great. Now it's funny that you picked up on that, because those, Blanc de Blancs and high acidity, and they have their place. But I think the more unusual the flavors, the better that these champagnes writ large, but ones that also have these kinds of baked apple notes pair well. And so that comes from really just what champagne delivers. I mean, you have a Prosecco, there's not many that also do the enlise, meaning when the champagne is made, they sit with the yeast and that dies, but yet imparts flavor and roundness to the champagne. And that can be as long as 3 years sitting on those remains before being filtered and to create the second fermentation in the bottle. Cava, Prosecco, those only spend weeks, if not maybe a month or two before quickly going into production and getting out. And they're often held then in steel containers. The champagne also spends its time in steel, but not before a good part of time, often in wood barrels, like as if they were making wine. And that comes through. That's what comes through in the champagne, where you're drinking champagne because it has this added warmth to it that has this, that whole croissant or that whole bakedness or tart or flaky crust is part of that on the lees. Well, it's because it doesn't come across as buttery. It comes across because it's effervescent, so it's got the acids. And the grapes come off in such a way that they are they are less than fully ripe. And so they have a lot of acid in them by design. So buttery, but it comes across as this like toast. This toasted note. That can have a beautiful.
But it works with things that are butter. Like I know it works with butter chicken.
Of course.
It works with coconut-based gravies, which are very creamy and sweet.
Correct.
So I guess the apple, the bakedness actually goes with the sweetness, the sweet undertones.
At that point, it's also a flavor, not just flavor, but it's a texture. That buttered chicken and that coconut, loves to have an acid that cuts through. Instead of adding to that butteredness. Like if you had a buttery Chardonnay on top of that, it would be a little too much. You'd be reaching for the water to kind of... So that's what makes champagne is like this excellent way to play off of these, these textures. And then you're also playing off on flavors.
And it's almost like an intermezzo at every bite. You're cleaning your palate.
That's exactly
Yeah,
right. The
yeah.
acids literally wash it.
Yeah.
So, the sixth bite of the dish is as good as the first. Or maybe the second, because the first is like, oh my gosh. But your palate can dull if you overserve yourself.
Yes.
That 10th bite of steak or that 10th bite of a beautiful dish, Moroccan chicken.
Yeah.
Refreshed with the champagne during the course.
Yes.
Your utility of your enjoyment lasts longer.
Yeah.
If we're going to get really micro here. But I believe that's also some of what the passion that drives both of us. It's this mad scientist way of saying, if I put this and this together,
What do I get? Yeah.
let's look and see.
Yeah.
Let's tune into our audience to see what kind of reaction it gets.
Yeah.
Eyes rolling and smiles on faces. I mean, there's nothing better. I think. Tell me a little bit on the side, outside of customers and students, when you're cooking, for your toughest critics at home. Tell me what, because man, I there's no holds barred. If it's not, they'll tell me.
Yeah. In fact, I just had a conversation with my 10-year-old yesterday. He's gotten into a habit. I don't know if it's something he's picked up on social media or with other people, but he'll taste something, and he has quite a good palate because I've been, training them from a young age. And he'll taste it and he'll chew it and he'll even go, not bad. and I've taken it a few times and I've said, maybe not bad. Try qualifying it one way or the other. Not bad is kind of, where does that exactly leave me?
Right.
It's like, if it's not great, why isn't it? If it's great, why is it? Rather than, not bad.
Right. Because the flip side of that is that even if you got a good out of him, it's like, okay, well, what does good mean?
Yes.
This is actually a great concept, and we'll kind of wrap up here, but we have a flavor wheel that we present in our tastings.
Oh, wow.
And the flavor wheel is meant to cut out and stop the natural reaction of someone who's describing something. It's like, whether it's food or whether it's a glass of champagne that they put down and you ask, how was it? Then they'd say, oh, well, it's good. Mm-hmm. Good doesn't solve anything, right?
Yes.
So the flavor wheel is something where in the center are the basics, and the more description comes in these outer rings from the wheel. So if you start in the center, the 4 basics are often fruit, herb, vegetable, wood, and then chemical.
Okay.
So anything that starts off on chemical gets into rings that you just don't want to, it starts off bad, but it's good to train your palate on something that may have gone wrong, and then be able to say, oh, that tastes like a wet sock, or like a burnt match, or, okay, well, I got too much char on it, or something happened.
Yeah.
But outside of that, when you start breaking down, okay, vegetable and herbs, where do we go with that? Well, herbaceous, great. Is this Thai basil sweet? Or is this rosemary wood? Where is this? And to the degree that your children can kind of, if not name the herb, go into that kind of description, you can at least stop them at, not bad means, okay, fine. Does that mean fruit or wood or vegetable or herb?
That's so funny you should say that, because in my teaching days with special needs kids, we used to have an emotions wheel.
Ooh, yeah.
Which was the same thing, with the happiness, sadness, embarrassment, anger in the middle, and then all the much more nuanced emotions that can come off that. And because they had difficulties expressing their emotions, they would just point and say, that's how I'm feeling. And it's exactly the same thing.
I'd have to have some words with my child if they pointed and said, I'm embarrassed. I'm eating this, I feel embarrassed. Okay, please. But like fruit can go into, berries and citrus.
Yes.
And citrus can go lemon, grapefruit, lime, and berries can go cassis, strawberry, blueberry, all sorts of different ways. And now you're just refining more if you just kind of sit with it. And there's no wrong answers. It's just levels of perception of where you are at this moment, tasting the food or tasting the champagne. And the wine wheel is just this guide that says where do you feel, where do you taste? We'll have to
look that up.
I'll share mine. I'd be happy to share mine with you. Well, Naina, this has been absolutely a pleasure. I can't thank you enough for this conversation. Yep.
Thank you.
And let's continue to go out there and move people to from the familiar to the unfamiliar.
Cheers to that.
Yeah. Cheers. Thank you so much.